good afternoon, and welcome to the panel discussion on Rethinking Cybersecurity, Building a Resilient Digital Infrastructure. This discussion is brought to you by the Economic Times and by Microsoft. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Alokesh Bhattacharya. I'm Senior Editor of the Economic Times, and I will host today's discussion along with my colleague Suchetna.
Good afternoon, all of you. I'm Suchetna Ray, Senior Assistant Editor of the Economic Times. It's a pleasure to have all of you today on the panel. And before we begin, a quick round of introductions. We have with us Atul Gupta, Partner, Head of Cybersecurity, KPMG India, Badri Subramanian, Vice President MIS, Bajaj Auto, and Chandan Pani, Chief Information Security Officer, Mindtree Limited.
We also have with us Yuval Wolman. He's the Chief Cyber Officer of UST and the Managing Director of Israel and President Cyberproof of UST. And last but not the least, we have with us Deepak Talwar, National Cybersecurity Officer of Microsoft India. Very warm welcome to all of you on this panel, and a very warm welcome to the audience who are watching us here.
What we've seen is that cyber criminals have never been as active, perhaps, as we've seen them during this pandemic. In fact, you could say that the COVID-19 pandemic was actually accompanied by a cybersecurity pandemic.
Very high percentage of attacks, and the attacks have really intensified, like Suchetna mentioned. And all these attacks have been targeted at corporations, at governments, at critical infrastructure, at you, at me, right? Individuals like us, at our homes.
You know, such a situation would normally lead to a spurt in investments in cybersecurity. That's what you would think. But reports indicate that businesses were busy with ensuring business continuity, and this has led to cybersecurity investments actually taking a backseat. To take all these questions and debate on the larger issues, we have, of course, on the panel today, cybersecurity leaders from some of India's top organizations, and we hope today's discussion will throw some light on what steps companies can take to neutralize this spike in cyber threats. To start things off, I would like to invite Atul Gupta of KPMG India to set the context before we delve into today's discussion. Over to you, Atul.
Thank you, Suchetna and Alokesh, for setting that background. And good day, everyone. It's a privilege and honor to be out over here and having a conversation on a topic which is so close to me. I know I'm bound by the timelines, otherwise I could just go on and on. But let me just start setting some context over here and looking at the topic, which is resilience in bringing in the digital infrastructure. Is that what we are looking upon now, going upon when we are rethinking cybersecurity? I'm a firm believer when I look at this subject, as well as otherwise, that there's been a while now the digital world or the virtual world and the physical world has been coexisting. And there have been enough and more opportunities for one to pick learnings from one part of the world and take it to the other world. The year gone by, 2020, will be known in the history for many reasons. We were not prepared as mankind to deal with it, but the physical world stood up to it. And what came out was the resilience of the mankind. And that resilience of the mankind really came in because of the background in which the entire human civilization has evolved over a period of time. It's a great opportunity for us to bring that learning from a physical world into a virtual world, where we are realizing that the virtual world is becoming a big reality and the way for us to operate going forward. But resilience is going to be fundamental if we have to make the virtual world to be as operative as the physical world has been over the past few decades. We at KPMG have been looking at cybersecurity from multiple lenses. A traditional approach used to be looking at cyber as a technology risk, but we elevated the conversations and we took the conversation to a level where we started looking how the boards in the organizations are looking at it, how the chief executives of the organizations looking at it. And every year, KPMG does a global survey of the chief executives. Since 2016, globally, cyber has been coming as the top 5 risk by all the global chief executives and the leaderships, which possibly implies that it's no longer just a back office risk. It's not just a technology risk. It's a risk which really matters at the boardroom level. It's a risk where the business executives are really bothered. But the year gone by, 2020, was even more interesting. And this was a special year where we as KPMG did 2 surveys. We did one which was prior to the pandemic, which was in the month of January, February, and March. And we did the one which happened after the pandemics started upon. It was with a pause, 3 months pause thereafter when the survey was conducted. What emerged in both of these surveys, cyber was again featuring among the top 5 risks. So it's good to see that the boards and the chief executives are very clearly aligned, saying cyber is going to be continued to be looked upon as a business risk. And it's no longer a business risk. I'll flip upon the conversation over here. It's actually becoming a competitive opportunity or a differentiation opportunity. And Alokesh, you just talked upon saying how digital channels have been embraced in the year gone by, how most of the stakeholders are interfacing and interacting through digital channels. And what's becoming fundamental to that is establishing digital trust. If you can't establish digital trust, those stakeholders are not going to be having right interaction with you and your organization. So cyber is no longer a risk which organizations need to deal upon as a business risk. It's actually, if you don't deal with it, you're going to potentiality of information, integrity of information. Everyone today is talking on saying that's important, but what is extremely important is how resilient are we in today's environment, because the attacks are just increasing. So it's no longer a question of if there will be an attack. The question is more when there is an attack, how resilient am I to withstand that attack? So that's the big one shift which we are seeing in the narration, which is coming across from organization. The second narration which is changing is looking not just as technology, the risk elements, but looking at risks more closely. And if the biggest risk has emerged from the malware and ransomware, the double click is today coming on data resilience. How do you create a data strategy which is resilient enough to operate in an environment in which we are operating upon? And that's a point which maybe from a maturity perspective, we still have a long way to go about dealing with it. The third one, which is emerging, is the entire emergence of a new category, which has always been in existence, by the way, is third-party risk or supply chain risk. It's emerged in a very big way. It's a trusted third-party providers who are bringing in a very, very different risk to the organizations. It was visible in the month of December 2020 when there was a big global cyber incident which was identified, and it was attributed to a supply chain attack which happened upon. And again, the world started questioning, saying, is there enough trust which we are building upon if we have to augment our capabilities on resilience? And that's becoming a big debate and a big topic to be looked upon at this point of time. The fourth one is this decade. If I was to take 2020 off as an aberration, this decade is going to be a decade of everything being connected, be it with the newer technologies coming in form of 5G, be it on Industry 4.0 becoming closer in a reality, be it IoT and connected becoming more and more closer at this point of time. And when everything is connected, then resilience becomes utmost important. So that's the fourth big trend which is coming across. And the last but not the least trend, the trend which I wanted to highlight, is ability to embed artificial intelligence and decision making. If you cannot bring upon a technology which are operating on two levels, one is on ethical side, which is a completely different subject, maybe not for the time today, but the second is being resilient enough for the decisions to be taken upon and to be providing the value chain from there on. If that is not resilient enough, then we are not preparing our virtual world to coexist with the physical world, the pace at which we have started this journey. So those are my 5 key points, which I wanted to start and set the context upon, saying why this topic is so resilient, is so important and relevant when we are looking upon from a resilient and a digital infrastructure. And maybe that's the decade, that's the term which we should be using for this decade. And I would like to add upon to that term, building upon digital trust also, because trust and resilience has to go somewhere hand in hand. Otherwise, the coexistence which is there between the virtual world and physical world may not have the right dynamics to operate upon together.
So it's time for us to dive into the discussion, and I'll begin by asking Yuval a question. This is we all know about the standards that we follow in India, We all know that the government now is seriously considering upping its cybersecurity strategy because of the several attacks from China that we thought on the stock exchange, the Bombay electricity. And also recently, a group of ministers of the government said that in the next 6 months, perhaps, every company in India, even at a small level, will have to have a dedicated cybersecurity cell. So when we compare India's efforts and the protocols that we follow in India, globally, how do they compare? Where does India stand?
Thank you for the time that you gave me, and I'm very honored to be in this panel. I think that you guys, allocation, Suchit and I, you built a very interesting panel, and varied one, because people from KPMG and Microsoft and Mindtree, and I'm sorry for getting the other
Bajaj Auto.
right? They are all very relevant to the threats that we're seeing in the Indian market. Each one from a different perspective, attacker or consumer, defense or offense. I believe that the Indian market is, I read only yesterday data coming in that it is 3 times higher in terms of vulnerability attacks taking place in India. And you mentioned some of them from the adversary in China, but there are many other adversaries that India is facing. Some from a national perspective, some from not the state level perspective, just groups, rogue groups of hackers. And I know from what I've read, although I'm not living in India yet, but I'm part of UST, which is a very rooted company in many parts in India. And I'm following and I'm seeing that the Indian government has brought up many initiatives, not only in the cybersecurity area, but rather in the digital transformation area, which only exposes more the realm for attackers. I know those initiatives are even effective, but the magnitude of the Indian market and the magnitude of the Indian population, the consumers, is so big that the process will take a few more years. I know that in the private sector, let's talk about the private sector for a moment. In India, there are many initiatives already being taking place, even without the pressure coming from the government, the federal government or the state governments. I see somewhat a gap between some sectors to others. If you look at the infrastructure, critical infrastructure, there is still a significant gap and vulnerabilities attached to it. But if you go to the banking or the financial system, we are seeing more and more customers being aware, allocating more budgets. We're seeing, I would like to second your opening statement and say that there is an ongoing trend. Let me take another step forward on that. In the cloud migrating environment, that India, I would say, is even a leader, not only as a services provider, but also as a business private sector consumer. It creates even bigger risks that needs to be mitigated. When you look at the global arena, let me give you a perspective. I'm speaking with you from Tel Aviv, from Israel. So I want to give you, Israel is a much smaller company, probably a neighborhood of in size of a large Indian metropolitan. In Israel, which is a powerhouse for cybersecurity capabilities, both on the offensive side from a state level perspective, also on the defensive side. UST is working a lot of, as in Cyberproof, the cybersecurity division of UST, we have very advanced capabilities in the defense and monitoring side. But generally speaking, even in Israel, the powerhouse of hundreds, if not thousands of cybersecurity startups, we see a significant gap between the public sector and the private sector. The public sector, we have, I'm not talking about offense now, I'm talking about how to secure the perimeter of critical infrastructure companies or energy companies, etc. You have a very clear regulation and allocation of budgets and resources coming from the government to the public sector, to the public related sector for defense. When you go to the private sector, you see many vulnerabilities. We also have adversaries, as you can guess, national adversaries, and we are being attacked daily. And we see a lower pace, too low pace of protection taking place. The regulation is very advanced, but the gap between regulation and protection is still big in the Israeli private sector. I'm also seeing that in the States. When you're looking at our UST US North American customers, we see a gap between different sectors. I don't want to make verticalization of the problem, but there is a significant difference between financial institutions, and we have here some representation of this sector. In the States, we see a highly regulated, highly aware of the federated needs of those enterprises to retail or heavy industry. So those gaps are gaps in implementation of the policies are different across sectors, North America, even here in Israel, and also in Europe with our UST customers in Europe. I have many thoughts about how to mitigate that. Most of them are related to the wonderful panel members here, but I will save it to later probably.
Thank you, Yuval. Very, very interesting points you make. I will. Yes, Chandan, I was going to come to you only. So you make your point, then I'll ask you my question.
Sure. I echo with thoughts of Yuval. See, if you look at in last couple of years, the Digital India mission, which was started some time back, and part of that adoption of digital technologies, which is growing pretty fast in India, right? Couple of years back, probably the adoption of technology in government sector was not that much. Now, if you look at it currently, probably 50 plus smart cities, couple of safe cities, which are kind of digitally entangled with applications, cameras, digital surveillance systems, ITMS, your municipality corporations were well integrated with the digital ecosystem. Now, along with this, there is a continuous push to improve the technology to ensure that right set of services are given to citizens of India. Now, along with this, what is happening is your cyber requirement or the cyber security requirement for India as such is also growing. So there is a continuous push going on to ensure that our IoT endpoints are secured, the IoT endpoints are secured, the platforms what we are currently using are also secured. There's the right amount of push is going on from Government of India to ensure that security is adopted at different levels, right? The different public-private partnership programs are going on, so that there is a continuous push going on to ensure that the right amount of security as a country we are also adopting at par with international standards. Now, if you look at from a statistics point of view, see what happens is at times we feel that probably things are not right within India. But if you look at any other advanced country, similar kind of attacks are there, similar kind of issues are there. If you look at a critical infrastructure attack, I think it is elsewhere it is more visible than what is happening in India. Of attack, probably we are at par with any other nation what is currently going on, but that is not something which is good to boast about. But my point is, yes, we are trying to improve our cybersecurity posture as a country. We are also trying to ensure that right set of technologies is actually getting partner inside India, and Government of India also is focusing on this piece.
Chandan has responded. I'd also like Badri and Deepak to come in on those issues. Who wants to start? Badri.
Thank you for pointing that out, and thank you for giving an opportunity, Suchetna, Lokesh, and good start to the entire conversation at all. Great insights from Yuval from the perspective of what the industries are lying towards. But the way that I see it and I belong to the automobile industry, though there is nothing much predominantly in terms of an overarching standard which kind of aligns to automobile in terms of ISO, the demand, especially when it comes to connected devices, especially when we actually were launching our product, which is electronically enabled, is pretty high. And we need to follow the NIST standards. There is a definition and a construct around which we need to work. There is a constant intervention which is coming in from the Government of India to secure ourselves. There is a constant interaction which is currently happening with state government boards, specifically the specialized branches on investigation, especially alerting us on threats from outside this country. And it is very heartening to know that the Government of India is taking a conscious stand in terms of helping organizations to realize as to what exactly is impending threat outside. And it's helped us to relook as to what we have as an implementation in terms of technology. It forces us to look inside and starts helping us to visualize how digital trust can be formed, especially when we launched currently, when we went live with our e-commerce initiatives outside. We were very clear that information security will be bound along with the initiative. So business and information security are now going hand in hand. Instead of underplaying information security, it is foreplaying it. It is ensuring that we are taking it upfront, and we are taking the bull by the horns. Apart from that, we have created awareness campaigns in the country, which is also pushed very, very categorically by the government of India. So there's a lot of initiative driven by and supported by the government, and we are constantly being assisted today.
I'll take the same question to Deepak. You would like to chime in here?
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity, and fortunate that we already have, a view. Alok said, then Alok has set the context of how we are seeing the resilience. But going by the topic, saying rethinking cybersecurity, and I'll go open. What is it we need to rethink? What is it we were not doing? We also need to see from everything in the past we have seen. But one thing which got completely changed was 2020, while we were talking about COVID-19 and seeing post-COVID era which has started now. The landscape has shifted to cloud first, coming from a cloud platform provider, organization. And even as cloud first and edge first world, we believe that cybersecurity is at the core. There is no doubt about it. It's a saying that are you in the journey of cloud in the initial stage or at a mature stage is the question. But the second part, which is most important, is the data which we are seeing when we set cybersecurity as a central challenge of digital age. Just to give you one aspect, it could be financially motivated. It can be nation state. We have seen supply chain management issues recently. The type of attacks have grown because of the digital estate, which has grown a lot. So the connectivity, like we are one of the maybe top 3 countries in the world of the consumers of the devices, right, with the population. And then it's not only about financial frauds or seeing into the cyber crimes. It's a nation state, already said earlier, talking about, are we building the resilience against a corporate safeguard? Are we building to safeguard government? Is it for enterprises? If you ask me, every organization, every government entities, industry bodies, everybody has to be in a condition called as assume breach. It's something like we are always living with the breach, and that's where you will start rethinking that, is this something to do with the attacks? Is this only about IP thefting? Is it only about other spying, and so on and so forth? One aspect more I would like to pose on threat actors, which we always talk, it's cyber criminals, nation state, hacktivists, and insiders. When I said insider, it is like an IT environment which is causing. And the threat vectors which has taken to build that resilience and to rethink is also not just social engineering. It is not just giving some information because it's about security. As Microsoft, security is not only security, but actually it goes beyond a security compliance, which is the era which we are living in. Identity, because we are living today with physical identity and virtual identity. While we are talking, we have our virtual identities available everywhere, And if you have all this available, is there a way to manage it? That means, can I have in this large digital estate, minimizing the attack surface area? We say how minimum you can get and how quickly you can respond. Thanks to Government of India, thanks to enterprise, all the corporates, when we have seen COVID-19, what worked well is the response to that incident. Now in cyber world, to respond to the incident is seconds or minutes, So how you can build or embrace the journey of cloud, how you can rethink in the era of intelligent edge and intelligent cloud to make sure. There is also an essence of threat intel. The faster we have threat intelligence sharing, for example, threat intel sharing between the governments, cross-border threat intel sharing faster coming to us, right? Vaughn mentioned about it. How do we comprehensively build that up? And then we go for end-to-end integrated story, not, it's something called privacy by design. So every product which is created with AI, with IoT, can it have integration as by design? You don't bolt on security. Security has to be built in. And if I can add on, Can I have privacy built in? Because now we are running with data. Data as an oil. It is going to be humongous. I will add more in my next coming opportunity. But this is how I feel.
Deepak, you've actually taken the conversation to our next topic, which was about cloud. But before we go there, I'll come to Atul. Very important points that our panelists have raised. But we have to remember that the cyber criminal is always perhaps one step ahead of us, right? And the fact that you have low-cost mercenaries, cyber mercenaries in India and in Southeast Asia, it complicates matters for the government, also for companies, when you have to, defend yourself against multi-vector attacks. Your thoughts, Atul?
Yeah, good question, Suchetna. And I think this threat has not changed in the recent past. While building on the point what Deepak said, maybe the landscape has changed. And what's really bringing upon into question is, are we applying the same design principles which we were applying in the yesteryears? And if we believe those will be good enough in the current digital age, then we are not preparing ourselves to deal with the various attackers, whether they are constantly evolving or whether they are constantly coming upon with newer innovations. I think my recommendation at this moment is we need to go back to the design principles of how cybersecurity is being looked upon. And that needs to be changed a lot. A traditional approach used to be create a very strong perimeter and have a big trusted environment within the perimeter. That has completely gone away. Deepak talked upon on identity, and identity is such an important element in today's digital state or digital footprint. You don't manage the identity. It's an open invitation to various kind of intruders and attackers to really come across. And as a country, while we have moved ourselves, as a nation, we have moved significantly ahead on establishing identity for residents of the country. But when it comes in the virtual world, that's an area where we have not been able to move the agenda enough. And it's high time that we do it. Most of the attacks which have gone by in the last 6 months, you'll realize the root cause has been privileged identity getting compromised. And why those privileged identities get compromised? Normally because we don't have very strong control environments around third parties who are managing those privileged identities. And that's a reality of the world in which we are living upon today. And it got complicated with COVID coming in, where everyone started working from anywhere, and it just opened up multiple opportunities for anyone to come in from there on. So I think it's a great time for us to relook and do a reset on the design principles on cybersecurity. The traditional way of cybersecurity professional also, where I'm including myself, I'm a cybersecurity professional. Our approach used to be everything needs to go through me. That's no longer the approach, because if you do that, you are becoming a roadblock in an environment which is agile, which is dynamic, where failing fast is the way to operate upon today. So cybersecurity also has to be running at the pace at which the business is running. And you can do that only by embedding cyber by design, rather than cyber coming as an add-on layer. And so Chetna, if we move in that direction, move in that area to go ahead, we'll be able to deal with the changing attack patterns which are emerging across. I just want to make one more point, because I know the previous one which was being asked, which is on the country, saying how are we doing as a country? As a country, we are fascinated by what regulators tells us to do. So we are at a very good position, or we believe we are at a very good position when it comes to banks, because the central bank has come up with significant measures to be taken upon. But Badri is here. Badri can say, when you start looking from a manufacturing, there's no regulator who has come across and mandated. I'm actually very pleased to hear Badri talking of, adopting frameworks, global frameworks of cybersecurity being looked upon in the organizations. Otherwise, as a country, we are fascinated with only two things. One is what the regulators mandate us. The second is something which becomes a certificate, which we can go out and talk about. Until we move forward from these two, or the regulators really bring upon the act together across industry. It's no longer specific to a banking industry. It's no longer specific to a telecom industry or a technology industry. It's cutting across all the industry. unless we get our act together from regulators, we will be always in a process of chasing upon rather than being ahead of the game.
I'd like to take the discussion into the design territory, like you mentioned. So what are we doing? What are you thinking and what are you doing and what do you notice in your industry in terms of how organizations are going about building this design for the resilient organization? And what do you think is missing that needs to come in there? We'll start with manufacturing. Badri, we'll come to IT and others.
See, the way that the threat is perceived today is outside of the boardrooms within the IT departments, especially that used to be the case. With COVID, that landscape has completely changed. COVID, bane or boon, we can probably keep debating from a digitization standpoint. Definitely a bane when it comes to the lives lost and the troubles that we are in through, but boon, especially when it comes to digitization, especially for organizations which have been looking at systems which have been used in a legacy form. And digitization per se has evolved and emphasized, it has created an acceleration in terms of adoption of digital strategies, especially when it comes to cybersecurity. In Bajaj, especially manufacturing, we have gotten our heads together specifically when it comes to what needs to be done, what are the threats which are currently imminent in the market. To realize those threats are very, very critical for us. It's a board level topic now. We present it to the board. It is extremely important that the education is given to all the masses, not just to the employees, but to everyone as to how to deal with security elements when it comes to phishing attacks or CEO emails, for the matter of fact, which seem to be now threatening the entire email landscape. And many organizations would be facing, including IT or what have you, that the way that the threats are manifesting themselves or rearing their heads cross boundary within industries are through various platforms or payloads, which are email inform, are links which come in, which look extremely genuine. How to deal with it, especially to the larger community, how to handle such kind of mails, how to report it, is an awareness which we have created as a campaign, which runs very strongly within the organization. So, for I believe that a pronged approach of awareness is extremely critical, especially to leadership, how to deal with it, especially when it comes to all these mails which keep on translating. Also, at the same point in time, one needs to ensure that technology is constantly being enhanced and is evolving to engage with such kind of proliferation, especially when it comes to the threat landscape. So therefore, the technology is being strengthened. That's another prong of approach that we've taken. We are taking everything to the cloud. So including the DLP, the proxy, the SOC, everything is now being cloud enabled. We don't want to be restricted to the earlier mechanism of control and mechanism of monitoring. We are saying that we need to probably follow the sun. We need to ensure that we are contemporary rather than being conventional. We need to ensure that the systems that we deploy are far much more in vogue rather than being out of vogue. Therefore, the systems that we are currently using are cloud-enabled, state-of-the-art, and that's the third step that we've taken. We've also been ensuring that the systems that we have actually deployed for launching new businesses are hand in glove, which I was trying to talk about earlier, which was never the case earlier. So in case a business line has to go on and it has to go to the market, we see to it that in case there is a communication which needs to go to the larger audience, which is the consumer, we are in a position to create that trust. We are in a position to create that confidence that transacting on an environment which is e-commerce enabled is far much more easy and far much more safe rather than being worrisome or worried about making a currency transaction on it. Therefore, we use disclaimers, we use mechanisms by which we are in a position to create the trust, and that has really worked for us in the inside. At the same point in time, when we take it out to the market, we need to be ensuring that what we communicate is what we align ourselves to. Therefore, all the platforms that we release in the market today are completely bound by an IT process of information security and tied up on the structure of saying that when we go to the market, there is nothing, no loose ends when it comes to data privacy, data security. We are eagerly awaiting in Bajaj, at least at this point in time, for the Information Privacy Act. And it is extremely critical for Indian landscape to start realizing that it is not just the GDPR, which is going to probably be one thing which is going to impact us. It is going to be the Indian Privacy Act as well as we move along, and we need to gear up for it. That's all from my side.
Thank you, Badri. I'll take the question to Chandan. Badri raised some very interesting points. As we wait for regulation, do you think the pandemic has actually acted as this big opportunity for Indian companies, where mostly we saw that cybersecurity was being dealt by in silos? So do you think that that approach has changed as, you know, security controls have moved to the cloud? Do you think that Indian companies are seizing this opportunity and they have an integrated threat management policy now?
So, Sucheta, that's an interesting question. So, if you look at what happened post-pandemic, right now, everything, the entire landscape completely changed, right? Right from your work environment, which was there for Indian IT companies, right? We started something called a distributed work environment. From office, we moved out, right? When I say moved out, I'm not sure how many cities, how many states we are talking about, right? I don't have a direct control on people where they are, what kind of place they are using, what kind of internet they're using, right? At some places, even I don't have a control on what kind of devices they're using. If I offer a VDI, anybody can hook on any device to my network, right? Now, if I look at the new perimeter, so earlier, if you look at a typical office environment, right? If you're inside the office, then there are layered controls available for you till the time you go out of your gate. When I say out of your gate, you have a local switch, you have a data center, you have multiple layers of control inside your data center. Then finally, there's internet gateway. Then you go out. But when you talk about a new perimeter, when you are at home, you are clouded with a bunch of IoT enabled devices, right? Probably a smart TV, smart speaker, smart gadgets, your laptop, probably your spouse or children's laptops, mobile phones, all are kind of integrated or connected to one particular set of internet router, where again the password is managed, not managed, where the firmware is managed, unmanaged, how many people they know what is the firmware. So these things are not absolutely in my control anymore, right? But the responsibilities are same, right? If I am accessing some sensitive data for my customer, my responsibilities are still same. I am serving the same customer, I am honoring the same contract, I am doing everything for the same individual which I used to work earlier. But now the risk landscape is now completely different for us, right? Some people say VPNs are solution, but VPNs are not bulletproof solutions, not a kind of a silver bullet for everything, right? Now, remote work, see, I think Atul also mentioned identity, how I know that you are working. See, if I see that name of Suchetana is there, but I don't know whether you are the person, whether your identity is misused, anybody else on behalf of you is working, right? How we establish the right set of identity, right? So there are multiple challenges are there. See, on top of this, the biggest challenge what we face today is there are tons of security patches are getting released. If you know, a few days back, uh, Microsoft released lots of patch, right, Deepak? Right? How quickly I can enable myself. So the question here is not Microsoft, not organization. It is how scalable I am, right? My infrastructure should be scalable enough that within fraction of minute, second, or probably within hours, I should tap all my endpoints which are there available globally, right? Not across India, globally, to ensure that right amount of patching is getting done, identify my vulnerabilities, what is there. I need to ensure that the basics of antivirus are also getting deployed, right? So if you go back and look at all those ransomware, malware cases, I'm sure they would have updated their antivirus to the date, right? But was that a solution enough for that particular day? I would say no, right? Because there are a lot of moving parameters are there. There are a lot of moving parameters are there, right? Now, if you ask me, what are those moving parameters that we should focus at? What we need to look at is we need to look at a cross-platform solution, right? So we should look at a single security solution which should cater to my on-prem devices, to my scattered devices, to my cloud, I think we are talking about cloud, right? We are talking about IoT. We are talking about the whole pandemic, right? How we ensure that all these are integrated, right? I should have a single pane of view. What is happening where, right? Which of my device is getting updated? Which of my device is not getting updated? I spoke about the scalability, right? And the most important thing is how I integrate all of this together. Whether I have ability to respond to a breach, whether I have ability to detect a threat from somewhere, right? Now, within this pandemic, what happened? A lot of Indian organizations, they scaled to the opportunity. They ensured that right set of security tools are deployed. See, the example is if you look at a lot of Indian companies for now, couple of months, probably more than a year now, successfully working from home without any major issues, right, in this front. So that itself is a great example for the entire world that we can scale. But that is only one side of it. The other side of it is the entire security fraternity is struggling to deploy those patches, to scale those environments, to integrate those environments, right? See, the another bigger challenge that we have today is while all these are increasing the talent pool, right? We don't have enough people. We just have don't enough people to ensure that who understands what is happening, right? Probably if you ask Atul will know that in India, it is very difficult to get a right skill set who can understand the global landscape of threat, right? From where the threats are starting, how things are happening, where I should go and look at it. Otherwise, what happens? We look at silo kind of a model. We dissect everything and look at one technology at a time, which is not going to help anymore in future because all of these technologies are related, right? If you look at how you get a ransomware, right? Essentially, you need an ingress point. You need to get it from somewhere. They're not going to pop up in your system just like that, right? Either you're going to internet or you are going to get an email or you are going to browse a website. So something you're going to do, right? So that something needs to be protected. So the individuals needs to be protected, the workloads needs to be protected, the entire ecosystem needs to be protected, right? So if I go back to the earlier questions, how we are doing, probably we are doing reasonably well. But if you ask me, is that enough? I'll say no, right? We need to still do more and we have to continue this as a journey. So this is not something which probably last 1 year we can take it as a certificate for us, right? Now, as we see every other day, new things are coming, right? If you look at last seven or 10 days, I think the entire globe has gone crazy, right? There are a lot of things which are happening globally, right? So considering that it is not a one-time exercise or it is not an event-based exercise, as a country, we need to scale up and we have to continue doing that.
So I'll come to Yuval because basically when Chandan speaks about the global landscape, apart from Atul, the other person who can tell us about global landscape is Yuval. Are you seeing that effort, that attempt to build resilience into the organization in other parts of the world, in Israel, in where you are from, or in some other countries, from a UST point of view? What are the trends you're seeing in the market in terms of building resilient infrastructures beyond India?
Yes, great question. Let me take for a moment, yes, about the terabytes that you mentioned, the fact that we can look and accumulate under the right data privacy regulation a lot of data, it helps us to develop new capabilities because you can get many insights, machine learning insight out of that. But that was not the question. Let me answer, let me take the seat of a CISO or a CIO in an enterprise, large enterprise. I believe that the biggest question or dilemma that he has now is whether, given the expansion of the cloud migration, the digital transformation, the exposure that has been made even before the COVID, especially during and after the COVID, with all the remote working, you are very much exposed, and the exposure and the security posture is even in a greater risk, as we said earlier. What would be my first dilemma when I'm trying to address? It is also, but I would say less about budgets. It's about finding the right alignment, the right partnership. Who can help me to internalize those risks that we all mentioned here? And I think Atul even framed that in a very ordinary way. Who can help me to have an alignment, a partner that my problem is his problems? This is what I'm trying to somewhat quote or summarize what I'm saying with customers, with UST customers globally, whether it is North America, Europe, or APAC, and even India. We, the customer, the enterprise, needs to find someone that will help him to understand the landscape, to provide him with solutions, with resources, and to integrate many solutions, because many products that already been acquisitions, investments already made, or future ones that the customer, the enterprise would like to make. And sometimes it's not only about one partner, maybe even two partners. I have in the honorable panel, I have at least one strategic ally, Microsoft, that we work with daily, but it doesn't necessarily to be UST or Microsoft. We have many great providers and solution providers globally that can help the customer, the CISO. You need to have a design, Alokesh, you mentioned earlier. We need to design it 5 years forward. And when we're talking about design, it's finding the external partner to be my ally, also inbound, because right now we're going through an economic, we are on a tail of economic, real economy mayhem or turmoil. We will see many more activities going on in the real markets, whether it's banking or heavy industry, manufacturing, retail, etc. We're seeing more and more enterprises in an unorganic fashion growing, a federated structure. You need to support a federated organization, enterprise. You need to work with its sub-entities. So you're creating a bridge, an alignment with the headquarters, so to speak, and start to onboard the subsidiaries. And each one is a new sub-customer that you need to make. So the alignment with the headquarters is key. And if I were a CISO, I would spend a few months, and I'm seeing many procedures and processes to find the right partner. And if I could, I would have advised how to build this, but there are very good organizations, probably Mindtree and others at KPMG, that helps to design this phase, those 6 months on average phase where you are asking yourself, what do I need to find in a partner? He will work with me in the next 3 to 5 years. He will bring more vendors and internalize their risks and work with another potential ally, as I mentioned. All this stack, technology, people, processes stack needs to be formed and forged in the first 6 months, and then you could start to onboard and solve problems of the sub-entities. So that would be the key dilemma that I would take as a CISO, and we have here CISOs that can relate to this analysis. This is at least what I, from UST, see in the market in the past year or so.
Right. I'll go to Deepak. Interesting points that Yuval is mentioning as you interact with allies, as he says, with partners, integrated threat management. What has been the adoption of an integrated threat management process? Are we using it to perhaps get threat intelligence?
Oh, yes. But before I get into that question, let me take the opportunity while hearing Badri's point of view. Chandan mentioned, Alok has given that point, and we are platform providers. So there is an opportunity to share. And you all already talked about how we are seeing it globally. Let me reset that word security is responsibility from public-private partnership first on a larger perspective. So it's a saying, and thanks to Government of India, we are coming up with National Cybersecurity Strategy in the coming year, hopefully. And that will set a lot of foundation, which the discussion started with design thinking, or when I shared as Microsoft, trust by design. So it is very, very important to see that security is everyone's responsibility. That's what we are saying. So while Chandan rightly mentioned that, is there a way when I'm sitting at my home and I'm using my Surface device, is it secure by device, or is my family take care and get more aware about those securities? Very, very different things. However, the system is same where I'm accessing my personal and professional data, same like smart devices. So we don't have a security separate devices for our work, and we have a non-work devices. And if you have to keep, the life will become very cumbersome, right? So how do you build business resilience is point number one I would like to emphasize on, right? It's not only cyber resilience, it is business resilience, which is very, very important, and not on the cost of innovation. I should not be compromising that I'll not use AI because it may bring AI threats. I should be using AI so that I can create what Suchetna you just now mentioned, to create an integrated approach. Because if I have a right usage of artificial intelligence and algorithms, I may be able to respond to Chandan to say this is the fastest way to conclude on your integrations up, or these updates, because the logics can be faster in using the technologies. That's one example. When Badri mentioned about manufacturing, can you believe a long time back there is an IT journey, right? And Alokesh said, what is the good design thinking, Alokesh? IT journey and OT is very different, right? Or a supply chain management, Badri, you will agree. So there is a need for convergence as well, if I say integrated approach. So I may be creating an integrated approach, but if there is no convergence on IT, OT, an environment, for example, or the multiple product and technology I shared earlier, 40 plus products or technologies an organization use, and the reason is we solve problem on that moment and keep adding. That's called bolt on. It was not built in, right? So now, just to summarize few points, we definitely have to minimize attack surface area. And what is the problem we are trying to solve is, today you will have supply chain management issue. There are server going down issues. You have infrastructure, critical infrastructure, nation state threats. Is there a single capsule or a single vaccination to come out of it? Answer is no. But is there a proper approach? One example can be, have we thought of a design thinking of an approach called zero trust? We keep talking about it, but just to build it up, I use the word assume breach. The right approach is zero trust, as in every organization. For example, for Badri, as you said, for manufacturing, it may be a different journey altogether, because there can be an old applications and legacy systems coming in, and at the same time organization is trying to move to cloud. It's very different than a banking. Or for Chandan, you agree that we may have a different aspect when we are building, how important endpoint is when we are doing work from home. Let me give you a stat here. In 2020, September, October, Microsoft has released a digital defense report. 3 top level areas came into the sharpest focus: cybercrime, nation state threats, and remote workforce, right? This itself gives very, very clear indication that the landscape which is changing, you need to have a very unique proposition. So to answer, when we talk about integrated approach, the integrated approach is one to go to, the world is moving to ubiquitous computing and decentralized. I think the waves are moving from centralized setup to decentralized. That's our recent update as Microsoft Cloud from our executives to moving, because the industry is very dynamic. So how we are reading it is, building a ubiquitous and decentralized computing is going to take, because the data is growing and we are seeing information all around. The second part is sovereign data, which we have to understand more, because now it's not security or, after you build zero trust and solve the basic problems of endpoints, network, and everything, you also need to see, are we sovereign enough? Is the data following the local laws and we are able to still follow the new technologies? Can I use IoT? Can I build my technology on blockchain and still able to go to cloud? 100%. That's another vision which we are seeing, and we are building it across the globe, that how do we build data or ambient intelligence. The third part, you have to be having empowered creators and community building, because security, as I said, is everybody's responsibility, and there is a model, as we are talking what all should be changing. There is a model called shared responsibility. If I'm a cloud provider, what all, from technology, endpoint, platforms, servers, even processes, Alok can advise more on that, building a governance, risk compliance processes, right? Building end-to-end strategy and creating a minimum attack surface area. Can we have that entire community building and exchanging the threat intel? So it is not only feeding or doing an incident management, it is actually getting the fastest intelligence. What we heard earlier, how quickly we can respond to it. That's the incident response and mitigation strategies. And then how we are impacting the global workforce, because assumption is this is going to be very large, right? Work from home will not be temporary, I'm assuming, whether 10% or 20% or for some may change. It's sometimes saving costs, sometimes it is easy to access, but all said and done, even if you go back to corporate, is our responsibility going to change for doing the design thinking? So I would say that you need to embrace somewhere on the journey, because security is not fixed. Have that journey enabled. For a zero trust journey is one of them. There are other advices which came that every enterprise, banking, government, all will have different processes to follow. But design thinking can be similar. My last comment on the points which we are talking about, the intelligent cloud and intelligent edge, the type of data which we are collecting. right? And the data which is getting stored, we all have to understand we are moving to multi-cloud environment. It's not about cloud or embracing cloud, whether it is public, private, on-premises or hybrid cloud. Rather, I would say we are moving to having multi-cloud approach. And how do you make sure that any organization is free to use all the technologies, embracing all the multi-cloud approach, is still able to, control their data, access their data, have that secured, and the most important is you are transparent to share. So if there is a challenge today, Microsoft came back very hard when the solar winds happened, that this is how we need to look into and what are the challenges very, very clearly. The recent supply chain management, when we are saying it's a nation state threat and it is not going to end, right? So how quickly we can even come out and say this is bare minimum, security guidelines you need to do, and this is where we see the gaps, even if it is for customers or for entrepreneurs or startups or even for Microsoft. So we are taking, that shoulder to shoulder responsibility together.
Thanks to all of you, to Atul, to Yuvan, to Deepak, to Chandan, to Badri, and to my co-moderator, Alokesh Da. Thank you so much for taking the time out today. So as we call this discussion, Rethinking Cybersecurity, Building a Resilient Digital Infrastructure, I think today's discussion has thrown up various threads about how a resilient digital infrastructure can be built. As we have been saying, and all of you panelists have been reiterating, that cyber is not just a tech threat anymore. It's not just a tech risk anymore. What the pandemic has really done is that now it's globally, it's a business risk. And we were talking about various surveys pointing to it, the World Economic Forum's risk bible that it comes up with annually. For the past couple of years, it has been highlighting cybersecurity as a top 10 risk. This year, if you've noticed, it's part of the top 3 risks along with climate change. So that is the kind of sincerity, the kind of investment that needs to go into cybersecurity as its risks increase. And as Atul mentioned, that in investments, as companies invest in cybersecurity, you're also gaining the competitive edge. With that, thanks all of you.
Security threats are everywhere. How do you know which one to focus on?
We are in a data tsunami. There's so much data. So what Microsoft does is we bring together human intelligence with AI and allow our cyber experts to zero in on what's important and help eliminate threats before you even see them. So you can focus on growing your business and we can focus on protecting it. That's our value.
Well, that was a great panel, and so far the event has been really wonderful, and we've had some fantastic insights. Hope you're enjoying it. And meanwhile, now it's time to bring in a very special guest, and the next session is also going to be as exciting as what we have seen so far. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Mr. Atul Tripathi. He's the ex-Big Data and Artificial Intelligence consultant at the National Security Council's Secretariat, which is part of the Prime Minister's office in New Delhi.
Mr. Tripathi, welcome to this session of the ET Microsoft Resilient Masterminds program. You are joining us on the discussion around rethinking cybersecurity, building a resilient digital infrastructure. But tell us the absolute need for securing every point of interaction, identity and privacy today, especially in a fast evolving digital landscape that we have.
As far as this digital landscape privacy is concerned, so why is it important? First of all, let's try and understand that. You see, we all are doing something or the other on everyday basis. Some kind of an activity is taking place. So we are doing our activities either on digital payment platforms or digital lockers, or even doing, I would say, even making payments, simple things as, buying or selling of items on the e-commerce platforms, or, moving our funds, doing banking systems, applying banking systems around. Now, this begs the question of, it's about human beings. Ultimately, we are human beings and we are interacting with the system. Now, that is where the safety and the sensitivity of the data becomes very critical, because our behavior is very, very key to that entire thing. So one of the advertisements that goes on in the television sets, we must be seeing, about a payment company which is saying, an old man is saying, no, I will not transfer the fund. Now, this is about our human behavior. We often tend to get trapped into, I would say, temptations of life and make an incorrect decision. So somebody gives me a phishing mail saying you are eligible for 50 lakhs. Now, anybody would be tempted. So it's about understanding the behavior of a person. So behavior analysis has to be taken into account while you're making a cybersecurity policy or a human-centric cybersecurity behavior has to be understood, and how users interact with the data. That is going to be the key around in today's world, and particularly among the companies and the practices that will be important points to be considered. So behavior analysis must be taken while you're looking at the cybersecurity, which is actually beyond the realms of traditional parametric or parameter defenses that we have. So we have systems like SOCs and antivirus devices installed, endpoint protections, firewalls. Everything is very good, but ultimately, at the end of the day, it's about human beings' behavior. So targeted, opponents, the ones who are criminals, they've got very clear-cut targets around. They know how people behave. That is how they target. That's how they take into account while attacking the systems. So we as individuals or organizations, when we're trying to define our policies, when we're trying to think around it, we should definitely look the behavioral analysis, and which is one of the most underlooked and underrated area in cybersecurity, which must be taken into account. There's going to be no dearth of these attacks that will be stopping around. So this is a stark reality that we are looking at. We cannot ignore, and we should not ignore this point of life at this time period. So this will continue. As far as the prevention is concerned, what we should be doing is, one is we should be able to identify the attacks. How is the attack coming from? What are the angles that they're going to look at? Applying of machine learning and NLP algorithms, this will actually make better algorithms for cybersecurity fight. So let me give you an example. We tend to get, some of the emails around email boxes that you are eligible for a particular, say 50 lakhs of loans or this and this, and you may kindly share your say PAN card number or your bank details, and we'll transfer the money. Now, if you observe the pattern out there, and this is a simple exercise all of us can do. If you observe the pattern, it's the same. The language of the phishing emails, I'm just giving an example of phishing email. It is almost the same. I would not say the same. They'll almost be the same. So can we design a machine learning NLP based system in order to prevent this kind of a phishing email? Because the most vulnerable part of anybody's life is money. I mean, that's what the cyber criminals are all the time trying to attack. They're trying to poke us with our banking systems. So can we apply these technologies? Can we apply these things? Companies are doing it, let me tell you. So the future of AI cybersecurity, which actually lies in about using, RPA tools. It's about using your AI tools to monitor your security incidents, integrating machine learning into firewalls to flag off any anomalies. So, 1 in a million, but can we find out that one event that will cause havoc? Identifying the origin of cybersecurity attacks through NLP applications, just as I talked about, the phishing emails example. Bots are becoming very important, because some of the things are very rule-based tasks and processes that are taking place. Can we use RPA bots to automate these rule-based tasks and processes? Also, can we monitor and analyze mobile endpoints for cybersecurity? Now, this is a very, very important point. Why mobile? Because we are spending maximum time of ours on mobiles, and they have become the most vulnerable of the devices that we are looking at. So can we look at this point? So telecommunication security is very, very vital at this time period. I mean, another report that had come out yesterday was about allegedly the Chinese hackers backed by the Chinese government had shut down the Mumbai electricity companies, and there was a complete blackout. Now, this is not a fantasy world. This is a true. So just imagine you are in a state of war and your railways are shut down. What happens to the troop movements? What happens to the food grain movements? What happens to the people movements? Just imagine, this is like, we are looking at real-time systems now. We are looking at real-time problems now.
Right. So, I mean, you have amply highlighted the need for a very strong cybersecurity strategy, not only for the government, but also clearly for all organizations, especially at a time when cyber crime is spiking at the exponential rate at which it is spiking.
Right.
What about ethical frameworks that every organization should ensure, should adopt to secure their digital infrastructure and responsible innovation for India as a whole?
Let me go back to a very, very simple, before I answer this question, I like to go back in time immemorial, and the importance of ethics. Now, what is ethics? Let me ask everybody. What's an ethic? It's a very undefined thing, right? What is right for me will be wrong for you. What is wrong for you will be right. So we have this image of, Krishna standing in the middle of the Kurukshetra and giving the gyan to Arjun. It was an ethical dilemma that Arjun was facing.
Yeah.
Right? There's nothing to, it's got nothing to do, it's a principal ethical question. All you have to do is just download few applications. End of the story. You can do whatever you want to do. So just imagine the cheap technology has become. And therefore, the question of ethics, question happens to be as a technology person, I am entitled to make very interesting technologies. But how much am I entitled to? How far am I entitled to? So let me give another example. People fighting versus robots in a battlefield. Is it ethical? So say one country has developed high-end robots and they have launched it on the battlefield. And on the other side, people are fighting. How do you answer this question? Is entirely your prerogative. How do you, what's right, what's wrong? I don't know. This is very difficult and this will remain in the human life. It's remained in time immemorial and will continue to do so in the human lives.
Absolutely, Mr. Tripathi. There's a famous Albert Einstein quote. I don't know whether he actually said it, but these days it's become very popular, where he says that it's become appallingly obvious that our technology has exceeded our humanity. I mean, the questions and the points that you raised perhaps point to that area. There's been rise of technology, but what about ethics? There's been rise of technology. What about whether it is good or not, good for us or not? Who will sit in judgment? But we know that in a post-COVID world, it's absolutely necessary to secure ourselves against cybercrime. The importance of data privacy also reigns supreme in a world which is so ruled and so controlled by technology and the rise of new technology every other day. So with that, thank you very much, Mr. Tripathi, for joining us. Thanks to all the panelists who've taken time to join us today. Thank you to Microsoft for allowing us to have this great discussion today. And thank you, Alokesh, for being a great co-moderator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tripathi. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Alokesh. Thank you, Sujata. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your time.
Bye.